another dimension. A dimension not only of sight and sound, but of mind. A journey into a wondrous land whose boundaries are that of imagination. Your next stop, the Twilight Zone.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Digression Session. This is Kevin. I have 3 members from Manic Expression joining us. We have Mike.
Hey.
We have Jim.
Yo.
And we have Patty.
Hello.
And today's Digression Session episode is the Twilight Zone. We're going to be talking about the series, the incarnations, the movies, the ride.
We have to talk about the movies?
We don't have to, Mike. In fact,
thank God.
We won't talk about the movies. We'll just talk about... How about this? We'll just talk
we
about...
We don't want to talk about kids getting killed.
We also shouldn't talk about the revived series they made in the 90s.
Okay, we'll just talk about the TV show. So, to get things started, who wants to go first? Talk about what's your favorite episode, why it's your favorite episode, and what kind of impression it left it on you. So, let's jump right in. Whoever wants to begin.
Yeah, move to someone else for now. Hold up one sec. Jim, say something.
Something. Okay, I'm sorry. I had to.
Okay, I'm already pissed off enough as it is. Just say something.
Alright, okay. I got into the show, once again, channel surfing, saw it on the Sci-Fi Channel before it was Sippy. And, I'd heard about it before. I've seen some of the parodies on shows like Animaniacs and things like that. Never really understood the point of some of them. But, finally saw it, got to see what all the hype was about, and I'd say it was definitely lived up to the hype. Favorite episodes, I've probably got a few too many. So the first one that comes to the top of my head would have to be One for the Angels, the one from first season episode with Ed Wynn as the salesman who tries to make a bargain with Death so he won't be claimed, but then Death decides to take one of the kids he's friends with in his place. So Ed has to try and distract him, keep him from claiming the kid.
Okay.
How about you, Mike?
I got in the show pretty much the same way Jim did. It was on the Sci-Fi Channel. Just watched it every 4th of July and Mondays.
July the 4th be with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
and
because when you think of
episodes, I would say either A Game of Pool or Eye of the Beholder. Both of them are pretty different, episodes. A Game of Pool is just a guy playing one of the best pool player ever. Just them having dialogue with each other, which is really good. Eye of the Beholder is just good.
Yeah.
It's a riff on making yourself more beautiful. Altering your looks to make yourself more. And then there's just freaky episodes like The Living Doll, which just scared the crap out of me.
Yeah. I kind of blame the Twilight Zone for starting that whole trend about dolls and ventriloquist dummies that are possessed by evil spirits, and became a go-to plot for so many bad horror movies in the 60s and 70s.
And 80s, and 90s, and 2000s.
Well, Slappy the Dummy was kind of an exception to the rule.
No, he wasn't. Anyway, Patricia, you're up.
All right. I also liked Eye of the Beholder, and I also liked, the Game of Pool. Another favorite episode of mine would definitely have to be The Masks. The mask just basically shows off the inside personalities of many people right before the old man passes away and the family gets his fortunes. It just shows, it's just a real raw emotion of people and how cold and cynical they are. I found that to be really well done.
Definitely. Not to butt in, there's another one that just came to mind that I think really stands out, The Obsolete Man. It's one of those episodes, it reminds me a lot of one of Ray Bradbury's darker stories. The society that basically decides, certain people are no longer fit to exist because their professions, their beliefs, don't conform to what the new ruling class thinks is necessary for society to function.
Okay.
How about you, Kev?
Well, for me, I have a lot of favorite episodes of The Twilight Zone. My all-time favorite episode, it's really a tie because it's one of my favorite shows, so it's really hard to narrow them. So in no particular order, I'm going to say The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street is my favorite because I like at the end when the aliens just turn around and say, let them just go kill one another because, we were going to, they were going to take over the planet and stuff, but what's the point? Because they're just like, going to kill one another.
They were going to take over the planet, but they were going to use the people's paranoia to have them
fight each other out. Yeah. And another one is the algae, which I thought that was really good. That was a really interesting, good plot twist at the end when they had discovered that the asteroid they were on was a cemetery. And, when you die, you can go to your happy place and be there forever. I also like the Talking Tina episode, only because, aside from it being, starting the trend and this whole creepy doll thing, I like that it was because psychologically we didn't know if the doll, if it was actually him or it was the doll, because the doll didn't move. And a lot of people had thought it was because of the budget. They thought that, the Twilight Zone didn't have enough money to make a doll move around, stuff like that. But actually, it was psychologically, we didn't know whether he was going crazy or not. I also like the one where, I'm very bad with names because I haven't really watched all the episodes. I'm starting to, Time Is Not Enough I would definitely put that as number one because I love Burgess Meredith, and the ending when his glasses break was just, you don't know whether to feel sorry. You really don't know whether to feel sorry for him because he's all by himself, and he finally had the chance to read all the books, and then that happens.
Bitch had it coming.
Yeah, I gotta admit, when I first saw it, I didn't know what was gonna happen. We knew something was gonna happen, but I didn't know that was gonna happen. I was pretty, and I love Burgess Meredith. I think he did a great job with that.
Okay. Who's on the call in their car honking?
That's outside. I can't help that.
Thing that I kind of second guess about Time Enough at Last now. Couldn't he have just held the books a little closer to his face?
No, he was really blind apparently. Because if you notice, he had these Coke bottle sized glasses. He was apparently he never took them off. But when he took the book, I think at the end we actually see him try to hold the book close to his face, and he just can't do it because he's just badly blind.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
And then he was just all like, "I'll read the big textbooks."
Yeah.
Oh no! just read Braille.
But I knew that was coming. Monsters Due on Maple Street. Yeah, Monsters Due on Maple Street. I think that one's been that's rung a little closer to home since the whole War on Terror started. Just the greater increase in paranoia.
I'll tell you something else, actually. I know we're not going to talk about the movie. I won't go into the movie, but I have this book called The Films of Steven Spielberg. He directed the Can segment. Actually, he was originally, instead of doing that, he really wanted to do The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, because that's actually his favorite episode of all Twilight Zone, but he couldn't do it because of the whole incident, and then, that didn't work out. But he actually was going to direct that because it's his favorite episode.
I can see why.
Yeah. I also like the one where I'm very bad with names, but it's the one with it's the two aliens. They go inside that diner, and like the people were on a bus. They didn't know what happened, and the alien says, "I'm going to take over your planet. No, I'm going to take over your planet."
Will the real Martian please stand up?
Oh yeah, that was a great. You know, that's where Eminem got his thing. Will the real Slim Shady please stand up, even though he doesn't want to admit it.
Oh, fuck Eminem.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, but that's where he really got the inspiration from. But
anyway, do you have any other questions other than favorite episode? How we got into it?
No, that's really it. We'll just do a quick one because we got to do turtle talk in a little bit. So
wait, okay.
Yes. So, does anybody have some dirty self-promotions to do?
Hold on,
Jesus
Kev.
Christ, are you kidding me? It's only been 11 freaking minutes.
Oh, all right. Okay, all right, I'm sorry. We can't talk about the movie and we can't talk about the incarnation, so I don't know what else is there to talk about.
It's your podcast, you can do whatever you want.
Oh, all right.
Well, if we are going to talk about the Twilight Zone, we might as well talk about the movies and the revivals.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the...
That was just a joke, Kevin.
Oh, alright, I didn't realize that. I'm sorry.
Jeez, Kev. Alright, might as well talk about the movie, I suppose, so go ahead.
Well, what's the start?
It's a film.
It's a film. Greatest analogy ever.
I'd say it was a noble effort to try and bring the series into, into the 80s for a new generation, but I don't think they really handled the execution. The original Twilight Zone was definitely more about subtle horror. Like when Kevin mentioned the Talking Tina episode. Some of the best episodes were those that dealt with ambiguity. Was there actually a monster, or was it just the person's psychosis acting up?
It was all Dan Aykroyd.
Yeah, the movie definitely... The problem with the movie was it just went way out of its way to show, yes, the monsters are real, yes, they are terrifying, yes, we are going to show off all these fancy special effects we have and make things dark and moody.
Well, it was the 80s.
I actually think, interestingly enough, Rod Serling's wife, who owned the rights to the Twilight Zone, did not want the movie to be made at all. See, Steven Spielberg, who actually, he was the producer, he was the main person behind everything. He was the brainchild behind it, because he said, well, if they made a Star Trek movie, why can't they make a Twilight Zone movie? And when they wrote the script and they showed her, she was like, no, this is not what this is not what the Twilight Zone was supposed to be, And they just went ahead with it anyway, I guess, because, they have more, I guess they had more power and stuff like that. I mean, she may have owned the rights, but they were like big Hollywood directors at that time, and they could have done whatever they wanted to do, I suppose. But what I didn't really like, I will admit this, I did like the first one with Vic Morrow, because I thought that was interesting. But I just, God bless you. But I just felt that the other ones, and I like the one with John Lithgow, the one that they redid with William Shatner. But I just did not. I just felt the other two. I especially felt the one with the little boy. I forgot that one with Bill Mummy. Where he turns Bill Mooney, whatever. Where he turns the guy into a Jack in the Box because he didn't want to listen to Perry Como. I thought that one was just very cartoony. I thought that was just Joe Dante just really butchered that one.
Yeah, it's kind of that was different. That was more Tim. That was kind of almost proto Tim Burton. When you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I liked was that Nancy Cartwright, who would later go on voice Bart Simpson. That was her first acting job. So I mean, that was really cool. But I mean, everything else, it just the whole sucking into the cartoon and then just and then pulling the rabbit out of the hat. That one I had is the movie could have been better, but it just I don't know. They just took it into a very weird direction.
Hold on, just 1 second. All right, sorry about that. Go ahead.
Okay.
Anyways.
So, yeah.
Go ahead, Kev.
No, I was just going to say that the movie could have been better. Apparently, Leonardo DiCaprio, I don't know if he's still interested, but he was going to actually, because supposedly he's a Twilight Zone fan, he was going to do a feature-length film. But unlike the original, which was an anthology, he was going to just make one movie, but just be the Twilight Zone. I don't know how that was going to be. But that was in 2012, and it's already been 2014, so...
How exactly do you do that anyway? I mean, just try and stretch it out into one, that would just be making it an overlong episode.
I'm assuming he's probably, my Yes, it was, because it never really stated whether he was going to do one based on an episode and make it to a movie. I think he was just going to hire some screenwriter to come up with a Twilight Zone-like theme movie and then have it be a Twilight Zone movie. You know, like the first one with Vic Morrow, where it really. Although I gotta say, I think that one was based on the one with Dennis Hopper, but they just changed it a little bit because I saw that one recently, and there's a lot of different There's a lot of similarities to it. I don't know how. I don't know if that's actually how he was going to do it, but I don't know how I would feel about him doing it anyways.
I think one possibility that they could have done is one of the last episodes of Are You Afraid of the Dark, called The Tale of the Silver Sight, was kind of like a TV movie. It was a 3-parter with one story, and maybe it could have been like that. I don't know.
Well, I just hope nobody decides to revive it again, because I really was not a big fan of the Forrest Whitaker one. I hated that one.
Well,
how about the '80s version?
Yeah, the Twilight.
It was darker. I liked it, but for some odd reason, I got more of a horror vibe. Whereas the original, it was more of a mix between sci-fi, horror, and just amazing thing. Like the '80s one seemed more like they really wanted to scare the audience. Like at the one they did at the end, they tried to achieve by trying to scare the audience or make you give a bad feeling.
Yeah, I'd say again, there was a little too much where the lack of ambiguity, but it did have a few pretty good ones. Paladin of the Lost Hour, the one with Danny Kaye, was probably one of my favorites. I don't know, for those who aren't familiar with it, the premise is that there's an old man who says he has a pocket watch that basically that's always stuck at 11, and he says that this watch contains the last hour. It has to be constantly held by a guardian, because if it's not, then it will begin ticking down, and if it hits midnight, then basically the world will be plunged into eternal darkness. So it's about his quest to find someone who will take the watch in his stead, because he's going to die soon.
Wait, MP3 Skype recorder just bubbed up. Hold up, stop.
Well, that's okay, because I have mine recorded just in case anything goes wrong.
Alright, then just keep going.
Thank you. Well, thank you. Okay, so it's near the end. It actually has a very, and it's got a very somber ending. I don't want to spoil it, because again, I need to recommend it.
Okay.
Those who want to see. And it's got Danny Kaye in one of his final roles before his death, so that's a definite bonus there. I also like the one called Eye of Newton, which had Sherman Hemsley as a physics professor who says he'll sell his soul to solve a problem that's been vexing him for years. And eventually, predictably, a demon shows up, offers to help him solve the problem, and when he tries to claim his soul, Hemsley's character uses some scientific paradoxes and loopholes to avoid going with the demon.
Kind of reminds me of the original episode of The Twilight Zone, in which it involves with a guy who is not a successful journalist, sells his soul to the devil so that he can be able to get the perfect story for him to become popular, and he sells his soul to the devil.
Yeah. Who was the narrator for that, for the 80s one?
I have no idea.
No one knows, because no one, other than Jim and Kevin, no one remembers the 80s show.
Well, I can kind of see why nobody really remembers the 80s or the later 2000s version as opposed to the 1950s and 60s version. They had to change with the times. The 1950s, it was all about sci-fi, and it was all about ambiguity, which was similar to those kind of movies at the time. The 1980s was more filled with horror and monsters and trying to scare you. And that was a big thing for the 80s. It was all about serial killing.
They did go to some levels of psychological horror, though, like the episode about the guy who finds himself in a world. Well, I mean, he wakes up and he finds that words suddenly have different meanings. Language has totally been rewritten, and he has no idea how the new language works. So I'd say that's definitely a psychological aspect.
Well, I think
not just straight up horror.
Well, I think the reason why no one really remembers it is also because it came out during a bad decade when they were making horror, where they were making one anthology show after another. You had, in the 80s, you had Tales from the Dark. You had Creepshow, the movie that came out in 83. Then you had Tales from the Dark Side. Then you had Monsters. And then you had Amazing Stories. And then you had Nightmare on Elm Street, the series Freddy's Nightmares. And then you had Tales from the Crypt, which eventually took off in 89. So, I mean, and then I think The Outer Limits had like a brief 80s, I don't know if...
90s.
Oh, it was the 90s? Oh, okay. So, I do know that it just came out during a time when they were just making all these anthology shows, and like, I think that's why they tried to do it one more time in the 2000s, but then it was just... I don't know why, it could have taken off, but I don't know why. The stories just did not seem very interesting. They seemed very weird, and they just didn't seem... Again, it played really more on horror than it did psychologically.
Yeah, Monsters tried to do a little differently because they would alternate between straight-up horror and comedy. Tales from the Dark Side definitely went a little too far into trying to make every episode, as dark and morbid as possible. They even, I think, ripped off a few Twilight Zone episodes. Patty brought up the one about the author who sold his soul to Satan to become a great writer, and there was a Dark Side episode which did something similar, only, instead of directly selling his soul, the guy had to keep making sacrifices to Satan. Started off with animals, then moved on to homeless people, and at the finale it suggested that he's gonna kill his girlfriend to keep his streak going.
Well, it was produced by George A. Romero, so I mean that's where the horror was really stemmed from. But there were very few episodes, very few in Tales from the Dark Side where it was mostly comedy. Like in the last season, they actually did an I Love Lucy episode where they literally had two characters that were very identical to Lucy and Desi Arnaz, and it was about their son who apparently they gave him away. I don't remember the episode. It was funny though, but they gave him away to the Martians, and it was pretty. It was more black comedy than it was more horror. I'll admit that. But Monsters did kind of sort of. I do remember one Monsters episode that I like, which was with Morton Downey Jr. and Laura Branigan. I don't know if anybody's seen this, where Morton Downey Jr. plays this very obnoxious radio show host.
Oh, geez, really? That's totally out of character for him.
Yeah.
Actually, I heard he played Hamlet in a couple of episodes of this other television show, so I don't know. Maybe I was thinking of something else. I don't know. So many shows from the 80s. I don't know. Anyway, and then Laura Branigan comes in, who looks beautiful, because Laura Branigan is beautiful. And she says that she has an alien, and happens is that she has in her this crate an alien, and that she says that it could do something special or whatever. And Warren Downey Jr. is like, no, I don't believe it, blah, 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 blah. And then really, to make a long story short, basically she goes to every radio show and she turns into like this little alien. I don't know how. It was a really crummy way how they did it. It was like cheesy special effects. And basically they get stuck and they turn into this monster. And she's really the alien. But, we're talking about comedy. It was pretty funny.
Yeah. Morton Downey Jr. kind of had a tendency, as Mike said. He got typecast as, these abrasive hosts of television or radio shows because, well, that's the kind of person he was. Yeah. Same thing happened in a Tales from the Crypt episode where he was this...
television terror, that's my favorite episode.
Yeah, he goes in to debunk a haunted house that's, was owned by this serial killer, and he starts, he's a traditional skeptic, and then at the end, he becomes the vengeful spirit's latest victim. I remember seeing that, and I was actually 6 years old when I saw that, and we just got an HBO, and I saw it. And at the end scene where he's just tossed out the window and he's impaled on the glass and he got the blood, and I thought, oh man, this is not what I'm used to.
Yeah. It was, this is my favorite episode. It was an old lady who basically she would have like gentlemen callers and she would murder them. And they said that it's supposedly so haunted that not even like mediums or psychics would touch the house. It's just like really bad. So him and this guy who looks like Dave Mustaine, his cameraman, goes in, and that's like you said, they haunt them, and then she hangs him by the camera cord, and then she chases Morton Downey Jr. with a chainsaw. And that's when you say she impales him.
Anyway, so the 2000s version, I guess there's not really much to say about it, especially once again during that time period. There really wasn't a lot of anthology series, but horror movies were kind of like taking a different direction. I think we're leaning more towards either remakes or bringing in those Japanese movies and to America and basically Americanize it, similar to, which one? I think it was called... which one was it, Kev, again?
Which one?
Well, I know that back then, the 2000s, they were relying a lot on horror remakes, and...
Well, the thing is that they wanted to try to revive Twilight Zone one more final time, and they kind of did it. It kind of, like I said, again, it came out during a bad era because you had celebrity guest stars that not only that they can't... I mean, they had, like, some good ones, I'm not going to lie, like Jason Alexander and Putty from Seinfeld. But then you had, like, Shannon Elizabeth and Jessica Simpson. And, like, again, the stories really were relying on horror, like The Collector, where Jessica Simpson babysits this little girl who turns all her babysitters into dolls because she doesn't want to be lonely. And it's like, you know, again, that's stemming from the killer doll roots. And then Shannon Elizabeth, you know, was a drawing, and then it finds out that she, drawn by this geeky comic book guy, and it turns out that she drew him, and he was just a drawing on a piece of paper.
Yeah, that's taking it from the final. That's taking it straight from the classic series about the writer who turns everything that he speaks in his dictaphone to life.
Yeah, they actually tried. They went a different direction as opposed in the 80s. They really tried until, like, that one episode with the little boy who, like, if you don't do what he says, he, like, turns into whatever he wants. They actually said that they were trying to remake some of the episodes, and it just didn't work, you know, just...
Yeah. There was a series called... Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, I'm done.
I was going to say, there was a series called Night Visions that tried to do it, which was basically, they blatantly ripped off episodes. There was one called Neighborhood Watch, which was an attempt to recreate the monsters that do on Maple Street by exploiting people's fears that a sex offender had moved into their town. And there was one called Patterns, which rehashed Paladins of the Lost Hour. Only in this case, it was a guy who was constantly tinkering with this elaborate machine because he claimed it kept reality together. So again, you can see, you know, no, there was a lot. It was going into what Patty said, just an attempt to keep remaking the classics. Even though,
yeah, it just didn't really like when they did that. I preferred more that they actually, you know, like, if I could understand if they did something like the 80s where they did new episodes, they came up with new ideas. But as I said, man, it's really hard to remake the Twilight Zone because the episodes were just so relevant from then. I mean, you can try to modernize it, but it just, I don't think it really works. Like, I really don't think people today would understand or respect time is not enough. You know, whereas today we're all used to Kindles and all that, and, you know, like, the whole point of a good book, and, you know, we're all used to...
Yeah, how dare things become convenient? How dare there so many books on one little thing? On a discount price? Son of a bitch.
But, I mean, yeah.
I think what Kevin's trying to say is that when the Twilight Zone came out, it was a much more simpler time, and ideas were very simple. And I think that the Twilight Zone was able to broaden out to something that has never been explored before. And then when you have the 80s and the 2000s versions, they've already done this. They had to do something new in order for it to basically revitalize the genre. But there were so many things of the horror and psychological genre that was already dealt with. So there really wasn't that much to bring out. I mean, this came out in 1959, so this was before Psycho came out. This was before a lot of the psychological horror movies came out. I mean, it was a show that was ahead of its time. And then when you have the 80s...
Especially because it dealt with the... You know, especially because that was a time of turmoil and conflict. You know, you had the Cold War, you had the problem, you had civil rights issues, and these played on people's fears. And there were several episodes that knew how to put up a mirror to these fears.
Exactly, and when you try to revitalize something that is based on those same principles, you have to do something different with them, but you have to do it something different that makes sense. And I don't think that the people who try to revitalize it knew what the main purpose of it was.
Yeah, there was an episode of the new series which basically dealt with, a white guy who doesn't help a black guy that's being mugged, and he finds himself turning into an African American. I mean, that would have had more of an impact in the 60s series when the civil rights movement was at its strongest, but, in a modern setting, it doesn't really have that much of an impact. I mean, if they could have reworked it a bit, had him become, Middle Eastern and see what Muslims and Arabs were experiencing at that time following the attack on the World Trade Center, I think that would have made it a little more impactful.
I think
I will say this: the movie. I will say this: the movie with and when I say the movie, I mean the one with Vic Morrow. I really liked that because it got this bigot and this racist, and it showed him that what was life like to them, like when he gets chased by the KKK, and he gets shot at by the U.S. Army because they think he's Japanese, and then when he goes to Nazi Germany, I really like that because it showed him it shows him that hey, you call us all these racial slurs and all that, and we're going to show you what life was like for us, how hard it was, Yeah. I like that one. I mean, aside from the movie, I thought that one was well done. That actually was directed surprisingly by John Landis, which I have to say he did a good job despite what happened on the set.
I gotta say it makes sense to have a reason for showing it instead of just saying, oh, racism is bad. You have to put a strong impact into it, like what was the one from the classic series, the episode where it's set in the South Pacific during the Second World War. One of the soldiers is basically sees the Japanese troops that he's fighting against as inhuman, and then he gets transferred into the body of one of the Japanese soldiers and learns that, and sees just how horrendous his views were.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. I think that was from the first season. I'm not too sure.
Yeah.
But I will say this: the one thing I didn't like about the Vic Morrow one, the one thing it was was how come when he first runs into the German Nazis, he doesn't know who they are. He sees the swastikas, but he's what, you don't know what a credit card is? And he's like, wait, he sees the swastika, they're all talking in German. Doesn't that kind of put two to two together and you realize that you're not in that bar that you just got out of, you're in Nazi Germany?
Well, he had been drinking, so...
Oh, yeah, I mean, I take that into consideration, but I'm thinking, I should put two to two together and realize, yeah, I'm not home. But I mean, the drinking did add the thing. Yeah. I also like the concept of the ride. I don't know if anybody has been on the ride, but the Tower of Terror, I actually like that because it had a ghost story element, and you didn't see a lot of ghost stories on the Twilight Zone. And if you go on the ride, there's actually a lot of Easter eggs. They have the one with William Shatner. He had the one where he tells you the future. You have that. You have the Martian cookbook that's there and all that. They have all these little Easter eggs. So I always got.
I read the original version of To Serve Man that the story was based on, and I found it kind of odd that they transformed aliens that resembled humanoid boars into these standard big-headed aliens. Though I'm guessing that was because of special effects limitations at the time.
Yeah. So what about you, Patty? You live in Florida. What do you think of the ride?
Well, it's kind of interesting of how the ride can be able to switch on and off. No two experiences are the same. Sometimes you can go really, really high and drop down. Other times it's increments of just going up and down, up and down. Every time that I ride it, there are some moments in which I do feel it's a little bit different, but other times it does somewhat feel the same. I don't know how often they change the ride, the way it moves, but it's a pretty fun ride. I enjoy it. All right, anything else you have to say, Kev?
No, that's about it.
All right, so go ahead, Kev, do your thing.
Is anybody else interested in talking more about the Twilight Zone? Anybody has anything else to say? Any more favorite episodes?
I'm good.
Okay.
All I have to say is that the 80s series, while not perfect, is underrated, and I'd recommend some people check it out just to see how it could be. That it's not as bad as the 2000 series.
If you can go check it out if you want to watch garbage. No.
Alright. Well, alright. If it's safe to say, since nobody has anything else more to say about it, I think we'll do the 30 self-promotions. Mike, you have any self-promotions you want to talk about?
I still need to do my top 10 overrated animated features, and then a few other things. I'm not sure yet, but I'll eventually figure it out.
Okay. Jim?
Right now, I am working on a blog about how I would improve /revamp the Call of Duty series.
Yeah, I kind of saw that on the Skype thing. You had a dream that you were Master Chief or something. Oh, not Master Chief.
Not Master Chief. They have the soldiers shrunk down to doll size and then they have to fight their way through a wildlife preserve. Yeah, I took a little too much allergy medication the day I came up with that.
Oh, so you took that probably from the land of the Giants. That's pretty cool. Patty, what about you?
Well, let's see. Coming up, we have a new episode of Turtle Talk, where we have a group of people from Manic Expression discussing about our TMNT memories in honor of its 30th anniversary. And as for any reviews, we have a double feature coming up this week talking about My Family's Got Guts and The Mighty Bee.
Oh, The Mighty Bee. Looking very forward to that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, Amy Poehler's I won't go into that, but let's just say she has seen better days.
How did Andy Richter get dragged into that train wreck?
I have no idea.
Yeah, a reason how he got... he's actually good friends with Amy Poehler. I forgot, they did something. He actually guest starred on Parks and Recreations, and they needed a brother, and, it was actually in the same time frame when after, the Penguins of Madagascar, it was slowly in, so they actually got him. But that show, not to derail off topic, was just an abomination, but I know there's a lot of Nickelodeon abominations, but that show was just... And oddly enough, TV Guide and everybody said it was they gave it such rave reviews, and I was like, what? I guess because it's Amy Poehler. For me, I'm going to be going on VK for 2 weeks, and Patty and I have a lot of things cooked up, which we'll get into. We will be doing Turtle Talk. We'll be talking about the 2 episodes, including today, The Lonely Mutation of Baxter Stockman, which I cannot wait to talk about because it was a really awesome episode, and Mutants and Mazes, which was not such a great episode. And, so just tune in.
Oh, and don't forget, Kevin, we also have a very special guest on our podcast.
Oh, we do? Who's that?
Well, the person that we interviewed last for Turtle Talk.
Ah, yes.
Stay tuned for that.
Stay tuned for that. All right. This is Kevin Guillermo signing off.